Hey, I'm Jeff and welcome back to another video. Today I'm going to be tearing up my brand new plant. The reason for that is I want to change its growth pattern from a trailing or vining plant to a plant that grows up a vertical support system. That way I can get larger leaves and get a much larger plant. So let's check it out. Here's an example of one of my climbing pothos. This is the Marble Queen. It's got a giant leaf and it's getting a new one here. So hopefully it'll size up to be something larger than this. This one currently is growing on a wood plank, but this is what happens when you allow a plant to climb up a support system. It goes from smaller leaves to much larger leaves, and hopefully at some point I will get fenestrations. So the plan for this video was to put this plant on a moss pole, but as kind of a last minute decision, I decided to do two separate cuttings, one on a moss pole and one on a plank system. And I will also explain my modular plank system invention. I find that any sort of epiprenum, whether that is the Orium or the Pinatum, does really good on a wood plank. Now the Orium are varieties such as your Marble Queen, your Golden Pothos. Pinatum is like your Baltic Blue, Cebu Blue, that sort of thing. This is the epiprenum Pinatum Yellow Sunrise. As you can see, there are many cuttings in one pot. So the first thing I'm going to do is take it out of the pot and separate these cuttings. So it's time to tear it up. I'm going to quickly talk about the moss pole versus the plank system and the one issue that I have with growing plants on planks. Don't pay attention to this leafless section right here because down the road it's not going to matter. But this is my golden Hawaiian pothos, or Hawaiian, whatever you want to call it. It's got absolutely beautiful variegation. So what makes moss poles extremely efficient is right here. So there's two moss poles attached to the system. You can add as many as you want. What makes this great is not only is the moss pole an extension of the soil, the roots that grow into the moss can obtain moisture and nutrients, but what makes it really easy is when it comes to do a chop and prop. So once the plant outgrows the plank, if it reaches the top, then you can simply make a cut and remove the top portion of the plank, or the moss pole, sorry, and then you can just pot it in its own new pot, and then you can just let it continue to grow vertically, and with each new leaf it should get larger and larger. But the nice thing is when you do a chop and prop with a moss pole, you can see all these beautiful roots in the moss pole already. So when you chop it, at whatever level it is you decide to, depending on the amount of moss pole extension pieces, but you will have an established root system. You can plunk it in its pot and it shouldn't really slow down any growth. Now, when you're growing a plant on a plank system and it reaches the top, don't pay attention to this, when it reaches the top of the plank, it doesn't have a root system if you're to chop the plant at the bottom. So you'll have to do a method of either air layering or you'll have to put it in water. But that was the problem I had with the plank system. So I made my own plank system solving this issue. This right here is a little propagation window that I made from the bottom plank as well as the top plank. So when it comes to chop and prop, I can chop it right here. And I added this little moss box on the back. This is a really rugged, rough makeup. It's version 1. But now when I do a chop and prop with a plank, when it outgrows the top, it'll have an established root system, so I can chop it. And same thing with a moss pole. I can just place it back in a pot and it will have an established root system. Now, previously, if you didn't have a root system, then you probably won't be getting any new leaves for quite some time because the plant will focus all its energy on root development. So this hopefully will solve the issue when it comes to chop and prop, and then I can just continue that process. So I'll take this top cutting, once it grows up here, I'll chop it down here and then put it in its own pot. Up here I've already pre-cut a propagation window for when the plant outgrows this plank. I can add another extension piece on here. And again, I'll add that little propagation container on the back. So that is my invention. I invented it probably about a year ago, and I'm just obviously now seeing the benefits of the growth. And what I like about plants that grow on planks are these chunky roots, these aerial roots that latch on to the wood. So today I'll be doing both methods and showing you how to properly set up on a moss pole as well as a wood plank. Now this wood plank here is version 2. Again, it has the propagation window cutouts, but I've also added these little holes along the top. This is how I connect them as well. It's got a little wood dowel at the top so the two pieces can connect. And then throughout the front face of the plank, I have these wood dowels. I can just insert them like this. Now the reason for this is, in my experience, I found that over time the plant will kind of grow off to the side of the plank. So these are little guide support pins so that the plant remains in the center of the plank as it continues to grow. You can just add these wood dowels along the front face. So that is version 2 of my plank. Now, let's take this out of the pot. I'm looking for cuttings. Like here is a smaller cutting or a separate plant that has high variegation. So this is probably one that I'm going to be placing on the plank or the moss pole. And this one here as well. This one's got fairly high variegation. The newest leaf, not so much. But depending on, actually that looks like it's just a branch. So I'll have to take them out of the pot. This one, actually this is a good one right here. This one, it's got a nice juicy aerial root coming through. So let's take it out, look at the root system. I'm going to try and limit the root damage. So I'm going to very meticulously try and loosen up all of the roots. So it's got a nice root system for sure. Now I just have to separate all of these cuttings. It's going to be a very time-consuming process, but I don't want this plant to go into too much shock. So I'm just going to try and remove as much soil as I can, and hopefully I can isolate each separate plant. All right, it took me about 10 minutes to get them separated, but as you can see, there are numerous cuttings. Some are multi-node cuttings. A lot of them are actually just single node cuttings like this. So that kind of makes it a little bit difficult to choose a plant, I guess, to compare a moss pole and the plank system, because there's only one stem that has like a sufficient root system like this and 3 nodes, whereas this one has like a previous propagation, the node has popped out, they propagated it again right here. This section I could use for sure, but it doesn't have any roots at the top, so I can't chop it off anywhere except maybe right there. What I'll do, I have to find my pruning shears. So right here, I'll get in there nice and tight, snip it off. So I can use this section as, I might actually put this one on the moss pole, and I might put this one on the plank. I think I'm going to start with the plank here first. I'm going to use this cutting. I just kind of sprayed them off here really quick. I'll be using this one as my plank plant. The first thing I'm going to do is tear off this little leaf, because that will be below the soil. Beautiful leaf. Now I'm going to find the little aerial roots right here. These little juicy white nubs or yellow nubs, whatever you want to call them. Same with right here. These are what's going to attach to the wood plank. Now the smaller the cutting, the better. The reason for that is because of the young juvenile roots. And plus, as the plant continues to grow, hopefully it'll latch on quickly and the leaf size will size up quickly as well. So the first thing I'm going to do is take my plank, put it in the pot. Now I'm using a smaller terracotta pot. Terracotta because it weighs more than a plastic pot. You can use a plastic pot and then just like insert it or place it in a heavier pot, but I like to do this. Now I'm just going to size up the cutting, and I want those aerial roots to go directly against the wood plank. So I'm going to be placing the roots in that little propagation window at the bottom, and I'm going to be firmly pushing the aerial roots to the back of the plank like that. So that is the size or the depth that I'm going to use. Now I'm going to take some of this plant Velcro tape, place it behind one of the leaves, just against the stem. You don't want to place it like against a leaf or anything like that, and then place it in the pot with its fully intact root system, making sure I'm not pinching any roots, and then I can simply add soil in the pot, and that is the process. For pretty much all of my houseplants, I use the VeryPlants aeroid mix. There is a discount code in the description of this video if you're looking to try it out. So now I'm simply just dumping in the soil at the front and the back of the plank. And where's my pencil? I lost it. I also just grabbed another bag because this one's getting empty. So I always have extras on standby, but this is embarrassing. I didn't have my pencil to push down all of the soil around the root system, and I'm just getting it to the point where it can stay upright by itself. And then I'll take it over to, oh come on, I need an extra hand here, to the bathroom, and I will give it a good thorough watering. So just making sure that everything is still in the center of the plank, and you want the plank, all of this packed down just so it doesn't flop out of the pot. So I don't want to damage the roots on the front, so I'm going to pack down the back quite a bit. Once you give it some water, that will also help solidify the soil and make it much more stable, because right now it's pretty floppy. And I have had many planks over the years topple over, but as this plant develops a root system, at some point, probably in the next few months, I'll have to upsize it into a larger pot, which is easy enough. You just pluck it out of the pot. The plant is already attached to the plank, so then you just transfer over the plank to a larger pot. So very easy to repot if you need. Now there's some common questions that I get with the plank system, which I'll address now. As the plant continues to grow up the plank, do you have to keep it wet or moist, or do you have to spray it or anything like that? No, in my experience, the only time I wet the plank is when I water the plant. So I will spray from top to bottom, making sure that the soil is completely saturated, but you don't have to keep it consistently wet or moist or anything like that. The plant will do its thing. It'll grow up the plank whether you put water on it or not. Another question that I commonly get is, won't this piece of wood rot in the soil? Yes, over time it will. Now there are hardier boards like cedar, there's a couple others that are pretty rot resistant. This, I believe, is like spruce or pine. It's probably the worst. It's a soft wood and it's going to rot. Now, I've been growing plants on planks for a number of years now. This one, it'll probably rot in, I'm guessing, maybe a year and a half, 2 years. So the chances that it's going to rot before the plant outgrows the plank is minimal. So I'll be replacing the plank, or once it grows to the top, and I'll transfer it back in. Yeah, it might be soft at the bottom. I've only ever had one plank completely rot and fall out of the pot, but it will rot. So like I said, there are different types of wood you can use, or you can even coat or use some sort of sealant on the bottom of this plank or whatever plank it is that you use, but I'm not too worried about it. Okay, I sprayed it off. The soil is saturated, and I did add a little bit more at the back. So for the most part, this thing's pretty stable. I'm just going to let it solidify in the soil there, but I just noticed that the top, or the apical bud, may have rotted off at some point or been clipped off. So we'll see if there's another growth point, or if it grows from the top there, or if it sprouts off from another node. But regardless, beautiful plant. This one I think will do very well on my new plank system. I'm really happy with these wood dowels, as I've had to use screws in the past. Now the moss pull process is pretty much identical to the plank system, except when you place the moss pull in the bottom of the pot, all I'm going to do is add a little bit of aeroid mix to the bottom of the moss pull. The thickly moss pulls have these little plastic feet, which I'm just going to push down like that, so that when I tip this over, all of the soil simply isn't going to fall out of the pot. And now I'm going to size up the cutting again, making sure all of the aerial roots come in contact with the moss. So something like that. This lower leaf I'm going to leave on, so somewhere around there. And I'm going to take my plant Velcro. And the thing that you want with the moss pole is you want to make sure those aerial roots come in contact with the moss, something like that. That way it'll entice those roots to grow into the moss. And like I said, it'll become an extension of the growing medium. So the moss provides moisture and nutrients as well. I'm going to use another plant Velcro at the top just to help secure the cutting as it's a little bit taller than the one on the plank. Now it looks something like this. Same thing as with the plank. Now I just have to fill in the soil. Oh, my pencil, what am I doing? I'm going to poke down all the soil around the roots, as well as, like I said, at the back of the moss pool. Again, I'm going to give this one some water. I already kind of pre-soaked the moss, but I'm going to water in the cutting like so. Just going to pack that down lightly. Add a little bit more soil along the sides and back, and then I'm going to go give this one some water. Okay, so here's the finished products. Now I know not everyone likes moss poles and not everyone likes wood planks. Now if you are going the wood plank method, you can use any sort of wood. You can use driftwood. This is simply the slats from my kids' old bunk beds, the portion that goes across the frame for the mattress. That's all I used for this. So I like to repurpose any sort of wood for projects that I can use. Now moss poles, they can be pretty expensive. Depending on which method you prefer, this is how you set them up. Obviously, you're going to have to keep the moss a bit more damp or moist compared to the plank system. The plank is pretty much a no maintenance, low maintenance method. Moss pole, a little more time that you'll have to input with these. You can water from the top with little water bottles, let it drip down through the moss into the soil. But there's pros and cons to each method. Now it's, again, whichever you prefer, but now at least you know how to set them up. And over time with both, or with each method, each new leaf will hopefully size up as it continues to grow. And a perfect example is my competition pothos with Tech Plant. Here's a smaller leaf. They have some damage, but as we grow up the wood plank, it gets larger and larger. So here are, don't mind that mess over there. Here are the latest leaves. Absolutely gorgeous. Here's where the plants are going to be for now. It's not going to be a real true competition just because they're different sizes. I may move them around as needed if I need to shuffle some plants around. But for right now, they're going to be right here. Obviously, you want to make sure that you have sufficient light. So there are these vertical Barena grow lights, as well as my Soltech aspect grow light, which I have pointed down. So you want to make sure that you have sufficient light for these to grow. Just keep an eye on the soil, making sure that you give it a good thorough soaking if it is dry. So I will let these dry out pretty much completely, and then I'll give them a good soaking. But yeah, everything's growing fairly good right now, but there will be definitely some updates down the road. So that's gonna be pretty much it for today's video. If you have any comments or questions, please leave it down below in the comment section. Like I said, if you're interested in the VeryPlants mix, there is a discount code in the description as well. I always appreciate the support. Thanks for watching my videos, everyone. Take care. Bye.